you.
Thank you. Always nice to
What's going on?
Well, as always, I have some interesting questions for you.
Good. Shoot.
So, is it possible to set aside a marriage contract or a separation agreement that somebody got a bad deal in?
Absolutely. So many people sign these agreements, and many people sign them for the wrong reasons. One of the reasons they sign them is because they're in a hurry. One of the reasons they sign them is they just want to get out. One of the reasons they sign them is somebody threatens them or they're forced. Sometimes they don't know any better. And there are many, many ways to set aside a poorly done domestic contract, whether that is a cohab, a marriage contract, or a separation agreement. Some of the big reasons they get set aside: lack of financial disclosure. You know, there used to be a great show on TV called Let's Make a Deal with Monty Hall.
Right.
And Monty would ask you, do you want what's behind the curtain or do you want what's in the box? Well, I remind people that negotiating a domestic contract is not let's make a deal. You're not supposed to guess what the other person has. You're supposed to get full and complete financial disclosure. And sadly, a lot of these things are done wrong. Sadly, a lot of the people that are preparing them don't insist on giving and exchanging full financial disclosure. And when you're having one of these made, if you want to rely on it later, you better make darn sure that you've given full financial disclosure. If you don't get full financial disclosure, and that isn't provided to you despite you asking for it, that's one of the key reasons to set it aside. In other words, if you don't know what's in the box, how can you decide if you want what's in the box or behind the curtain? This isn't let's make a deal. You get to know what's in the box. You get to know what's behind the curtain, and the other side has to give you everything. If they didn't, and it turns out that the deal you made was premised on false information or a lack of disclosure, that's one good reason to set it aside. Another reason these things get set aside is because they're done in a very hasty fashion. Think of a marriage contract. You're getting married on Tuesday, your bride-to-be or your groom-to-be comes to you on Sunday and says, you got to sign this thing or the wedding's off. I don't care about the 500 guests. I'll leave you standing at the altar. That really constitutes duress, undue influence. That's one reason to set it aside. Another reason these things get set aside is people are pressured into signing them for various reasons. If you don't sign this, you have to move out. If you don't sign this, you know, my father will disown me. If you don't sign this, you know, my kids will be all upset. Any pressure that's put on someone can potentially invalidate the agreement.
But I think that the actual term itself, also contract, agreements, they're very intimidating. People probably think that there's no way out.
And absolutely, right? The general presumption is, and the Supreme Court of Canada has said, that generally we will honor agreements that people make, provided that they're entered into fairly, with financial disclosure that is comprehensive, with a complete understanding, with mental capacity. You know, you can't have someone who's suffering from extreme depression sign an agreement. You can't have someone who's under the influence of drugs sign an agreement. You can't have someone who lacks mental capacity sign an agreement. So those are the various reasons that those things get set aside. Yeah, they're coming nicely. And then one of the other main reasons things get set aside is that these agreements don't generally comply with the requirements of the legislation, the Divorce Act. So if they are so one-sided, if they're so unfair, that someone really gets taken to the cleaners, that the agreement is completely unbalanced, what the courts call unconscionable. In other words, I can't hold my nose and let this one slide by. That's another reason for them to get set aside. So, fear not. Those of you who've signed agreements where you really think that you got fleeced, there's hope. You can do something about it. You absolutely can.